when we look at the news, there are different news about different things. It's a war there. It's the upcoming election here. It's trouble somewhere else. But it seems that the word that would define what's happening is division, sense of division, and maybe especially in politics. When I was preparing this talk, I came across some words of wisdom from George Washington, first president. And in a way, he reassures us that no, division is not normal. That yes, we can expect to be united. We may not agree, but at least we can have a sense of mutual support. So here is words of wisdom. So it's from the 1796 farewell address when he left. And I quote, "You should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness." The immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness. And he continues, "and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts." So we don't have to agree, but just like in a family, we don't always agree, but at least there's a sense of mutual support, a sense of unity. I looked carefully in the address, and I didn't find the how. Well, how do we find unity? And then I found someone else, and someone who lived in a time where there were also lots of division, where society was very divided, and with one word, he put us on the track of how do we find unity? How do we find healing? He even got a Nobel Peace Prize. And it's Martin Luther King. And he answers, and he says, love. And I quote, "Love has within it a redemptive power. There is a power there that eventually transforms individuals. Just keep being friendly to that person. Just keep loving them. And they can't stand it too long." And he continues, "By the power of your love, they will break under the load." That's love, you see. It is redemptive. And this is why Jesus says, "Love your enemies." So that sounds good, that if we find ourselves in a discussion at dinner and someone expresses political opinions and we feel like, ooh, it's been difficult, we know we don't have to argue. It's not about making our point. It is really about love. It's a larger sense of healing. But we can't leave it to just be loving. We need to be even more practical. So let's dig a bit deeper. And we'll see that this love is not just a human affection. It is divine. It is divine love. Some years ago, a good friend got married, and a lovely wife, but he had some trouble with his mother-in-law. And to the point where they could not be in the same room without a very strong sense of tension and a really strong sense of division. So he tried to be nice, he tried to be polite, but that was not working. And things became even more difficult when the mother-in-law just moved right next to his home. And so he would see her very, very frequently. So he would see her very frequently. And then one day there was a barbecue, a little party in his backyard, and she was there, and friends and family, and something bad happened, and he got hurt, so he was on the floor and trying not to pass out, and his mother-in-law was nearby, and so she got some bandages and to try to help with the wound, and he was there on the floor, really his eyes closed and praying. He was praying because in the past he had seen how prayer brought healing, brought a sense of peace. He was naturally praying. But there was a side consequence to his prayer. As he was praying, and he was very aware that his mother-in-law was right there doing the bandages, suddenly he realized that actually they were very united. When he was praying, all his thought, all his thinking was focusing on God, on infinite love. That's where he was focusing on. And he realized that as he was claiming, understanding more clearly his oneness with the infinite, his sense of protection, his sense of peace, his prayer, that his mother-in-law was also the very effect of God. God is the source of everything, so she was also the effect of God. And that brought some sense of peace in his thoughts. Actually, he got healed of the challenge, of the wound, quite quickly. But what he found out is that seeing his mother-in-law with a deep spiritual perception, not keeping a mental list of everything that was wrong, or allowing himself to be annoyed and even more annoyed, that he was doing everything he could to really embrace her spiritually, to really have a spiritual perception of her unity with God, that was really melting the tension. And this is what happened. Over the next few weeks, the tension melted and melted in his thoughts. He didn't talk to her. It was his own path. And eventually, it vanished completely. If you Google mother-in-law joke, you'll find that it's presented as something almost incurable. I'm sure there are tons of very lovely mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is amazing. But the point is, when you Google mother-in-law, you can see it's a relationship that is expected to be full of tension, and there is no expectation of healing. Well, in this situation, his spiritual perception of his mother-in-law, his sense of oneness and her oneness with God, really melted the tension. And you know what happened? Just a few months after, there was some discussion in the family about where to spend the next vacation. And so his wife was discussing a sailboat trip. And then he said, well, we should invite your mom to be with us. And she came, which meant that they spent 10 days on a sailboat at sea for most of the time. But it was wonderful. She passed on some years after, and they kept being friendly, and he was completely gone. He was completely healed. So that's the healing we're talking about, the sense of unity we're talking about. Doesn't mean that he was always agreeing with his mother-in-law. She had a very different perspective, but there was a sense of unity, and that's what we are looking at. That's the healing we're talking about. So the hope is that as you leave later today, or as you shut down your screen if you're online there, that you can apply the ideas that we're discussing today to your life. So if there's a challenge you're faced with, that you can take some of the ideas and begin to apply them, even being excited to say, okay, I'm going to apply those ideas to find healing. So we need to go deeper. Going back to the mother-in-law situation, what happened? Why this healing? How come that those very deep tension were completely solved, even without some form of a discussion, an agreement, or there was no human step? It was completely divine, completely prayer. How did it happen? Well, as I said, he was praying and remembering some of the teachings from Jesus. If you look at the Bible and take the end part, the Gospels, that's all of Jesus' teachings, and consider many pages, and Jesus was a great teacher, teaching many different things What's very interesting as you look at it is that there's a theme that is recurring, that consistently is brought up by Jesus again and again. And it is the idea of the very presence, Jesus says, of the kingdom of heaven. So we'll define that in a second. But people were arguing with him when he was saying the kingdom of heaven is here now. Jesus speaking. People were arguing by saying, no, your kingdom of heaven will come later when you die, and if you've been good, you will be in some kingdom somewhere. But Jesus was opposing this. He said, no, it is within you, within you. So we need to pause briefly to clarify the term God. Unlike other terms, if I say apple, probably all of us here have an idea of an apple. He may be green, he may be red, but he'll be an apple. It won't be a banana. But when we say the term God, well, it may mean different things from our class of ancient Greek, for all those who have those, and where they were cheating on each other, the gods, and doing all types of stuff. We're only talking about what the Bible says about God, which is basically life. Life, the capital L. Something that is universal, not something that is owned by anybody. Really, truly, infinite love. Pure good, accessible to all of us, always present. The fun part, if you look at the Bible, there are many, many ways to express God. Sometimes he talks about the shepherd, to convey a sense of being cared for. So let's not be stuck in words. It's really, what's the idea of God? What does it mean? It's really essentially pure good. So wasn't Jesus talking about this pure good, this presence of spirit being already present right here, right now, when he was talking, and always? So when he said the kingdom of heaven is here now, it's here now. This infinite love, this pure good is here now. And we'll dig more, but what happens basically is that when we're faced with any difficult situation, when we focus our thought, we yield to a sense of divine presence, a sense of divine love sustaining us, our experience changes. When we focus on God, and sometimes we don't want to do this because we're stuck with symptoms or an annoying boss, or we're really annoyed about the government or anything else, and we keep making the list of all the things that are wrong, but that's kind of like focusing on darkness. And if you find yourself in a prison cell, you can analyze the darkness all you want. It's not going to get you out. If you find a little crack somewhere with a tiny bit of light, that's interesting. That's because that's where you're going to find a way to open the wall and leave. So sometimes focusing on God is the last thing we want to do, where it should be the very first thing we should do. Our state of consciousness and our experience are the same thing. We leave our state of consciousness, which means that this is exactly what happened with this man when he focused on his oneness with the infinite, when he saw this dear woman oneness with God too, when he moved away from a material picture to really embrace a purely spiritual nature, when his thought was so focused on this, that's how his experience changed. And that's the healing, and that's basically how it works. So let's go even deeper. And let's see essentially how prayer works. Because in a way what we've been talking about is really how prayer works. This spiritual perception of any situation is prayer. It is understanding more the nature of God and our nature. As you mentioned, I was an attorney, and I left my profession to become a full-time Christian Science practitioner, which is helping others, providing support and care and praying and expecting healing. And one day in that capacity, a woman came to see me, and she said that she knew nothing of Christian Science. She had never heard of it. Just a friend told her to go see a Christian Science practitioner for her trouble. She said that she didn't really like the idea of God or religion, but she felt she was very spiritual. Some months before she had been diagnosed with cancer, doing a routine test, the doctor had some doubts, and then the final conclusion came. And she said that back then, a few months before, she somehow had the confidence that she would be healed naturally, that she would not need to go through a material solution. So she thanked the doctor and the people at the hospital. They were offering different possibilities. And she said, no, I'll go my way. So she asked about Christian Science. So she was very comforted to see that it is not about dogmas. It is not about joining a club or believing a set of belief. It is really what we've been talking about. It's really understanding more clearly our oneness with the infinite. This is this. And this is a very unique path. This is a very private relationship with God. So she asked me what she could do, and I told her that she could take a copy of the Bible and of the Christian Science textbook called Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by the author Mary Baker Eddy, an amazing woman. We'll talk about her in a moment. And ponder those books. And to me, this book is, it says the key to the Scriptures. It's kind of the Bible as a door, and it's kind of the key really opening the spiritual meaning of the Scripture. Not a list of obligations and of things that make us feel guilty, really the spiritual meaning of the Bible. And I did tell her that the way she should read is she should challenge everything she reads. She should really read something and see, does it make sense to you? Does it make sense? Do you agree? And then only go from, yeah, that makes sense, or I don't agree with this, so I'll move on to the next line, and to really imbibe spiritual ideas. And it was really fun to see that over the course of a few months, her thought changed completely. It went from very heavy darkness when I first met her with the medical diagnosis and all the prognosis and all those things, to a lighter sense of what she was discovering about God. I did say that she did not like the term God, and again, it's not about the word, it's about what's the idea behind. So to her, she loved the idea of the source, that she has a source and the infinite is her source. So that was resonating with her. She was seeing how it is infinite spirit. It means it's not limited in time or space. It is everywhere. And she began to see, over the course of our reading and over that period of few months, how she was relating to the infinite. How it is a complete lie to see ourselves as poor, limited mortals, that actually our identity is way more magnificent than this, that actually we're all at one with the infinite. And she began to realize this, that she was at one with the infinite, which meant that all the love she expressed, the creativity, the intelligence, all her life had its source in the infinite, in God, in the source. And that was making her very, very joyful. And I was praying on the side, and I'll explain in a second what I was doing. And then she kind of was not in touch for a bit, after a few months, and I did tell her that it is a unique relationship with God, and she felt strong enough to continue on her own, and so she was not in touch with me for, I don't know, a few weeks, and but really happily continuing to study the Bible, get ideas, and science and health. And then I heard back from her, and she explained what had happened, and she said that one day, those were not words anymore. When she was reading about her oneness with the infinite, the fact that evil is an impossibility, that all is good, beyond the appearance, beyond the diagnosis, she could really feel that sense of pure good. And she said that, well, something clicked. She felt it was not words, it was reality to her. And that's when she realized that all the symptoms were gone. She had no more pain, and she was completely free physically. It's been a few years now, and she's still a very happy camper. And I don't know what her job was back then, but I know what her job is now. And so she's now a Christian Science practitioner, and so she helps others find freedom and healing. So what happened? Well, again, what is darkness? Darkness is the absence of light. Do we say darkness doesn't exist? Well, we've seen darkness. I mean, it's a bit dark under this table right there. But darkness is not something. Darkness is an absence. It's the absence of light. Darkness has no temperature, no mass. It is an absence. Well, likewise, fear or challenges are just a belief in the absence of God, a belief in the absence of love, a belief in the absence of spirit. And the more we focus on that relationship, away from darkness, away from the fear, that's really embracing the light. And this is what brings healing. That's a change in consciousness. Healing is really a change in consciousness that is manifested in our experience as a physical healing, or as we've seen with the mother-in-law, as an easing up of difficult relationship. But let's dig even deeper to understand, well, how does it work really? Because now you may be thinking, well, I got this annoying neighbor for 40 years and I'm sure I can do something about it. Or I got this diagnosis. Or maybe my kids are in trouble. Or maybe something else. So how does it work? Really, prayer, put it simply, is an awareness of God. Being so aware of God that whatever we face with doesn't make us afraid anymore. We feel so confident that we're not impressed anymore by what's happening. So you see, it's very far from a recitation of words or asking something. It's really an awareness. It's really being aware of who we are, our oneness with God. And I would say that in practice, it can take two forms. I remember one day a woman called me, and she didn't know anything about Christian Science, and she said that she had a growth in her throat. And she was worried, so we talked about what Christian Science was and how she was not punished, that God doesn't send evil. I just shared some ideas, and then I became quiet to pray. It was early on in my practice of Christian Science. But then I felt I was in trouble because I was not able to pray. What I mean is I wanted to read a psalm in the Bible. I wanted to have some quiet time, but I was not able to do this because I had this sense of clarity that she was really at one with God, that this whole description of the throat and the challenge and the lump in the throat was nothing that belonged to her. There was a sense of God's presence. And I say I was in trouble because I felt out of duty I should take my Bible and pray and take some time, but I could not. I just felt such a sense of clarity that I could not do anything. So eventually I gave up and I said, well, no, I think the work is done. She's really at one with God. I didn't call her to check on her. I didn't verify anything. It was within our thought. That's where the healing happens. And yes, indeed, the next day she called and she said that most of the growth was gone. She was all excited about those ideas. And then a few days after, she was fully healed physically. And she still studies Christian Science and is very, very excited. So I would say this form of prayer, when we, in a way, we don't have any effort, and it can happen to any of us at any point. It doesn't take years of study. Sometimes it feels very, very clear, where, we feel very clear. And I think this is how Jesus healed. You can see when you look at all the healings in the Bible, Jesus didn't take time. There was such a sense of clarity for whatever disease was presented to him, paralysis and blindness, anything, that people were instantaneously healed. And I wish it'd be like that all the time, but it's not like that all the time. Sometimes we're all unique, but for various reasons, we feel afraid or we feel in doubt or something feels very impressive. And I would say that's another form of prayer that we could call Christian Science treatment. It means that basically we're going to take some steps to really put our thought where it should be, really at one with God. So in understanding what I mean by Christian Science treatment, let's look at a few ingredients of its composure, of what it's made of. Number one, prayer is always spontaneous. It's like singing. If I was to say, we're going to have a competition now for the most joyful song, I would not expect the same song all over. I would expect all types of different songs, different ways to express joy. Well, likewise, prayer is very unique to all of us, to each one of us, unique to a special moment. So it's not something that we copy and paste. We may copy and paste a recipe, but not prayer. So the question is, what is it that heals? Because it does heal, but it is not of our doing. It is not us doing something. There is something else that heals. You know, when Jesus was asked how to heal, and again, he healed paralysis and blindness and anything that was presented to him, when asked about how to heal, he said, I can do nothing of my own self. He could have said, well, I'm super spiritual, so of course I can heal, and if you get as spiritual as me, you'll be able to do the same thing. But no, he said his words, I can do nothing of my own self. So self is out of the way. And that's very helpful because, I don't know about you, but sometimes when we sit down to pray, when we're faced with a challenge, the thought comes, well, don't know how to do it, or not sure it will work, I'm not good enough, or whatever. I. Self-doubt comes. So we can really have the biggest kick and kick that thought really far and says, it's not about I. Jesus says it's not about I. We don't do the healing. Something else does. The thing that does the healing is a truth, a divine idea, a truth coming to consciousness that is going to remove whatever belief we're entertaining about the situation. It's a bit abstract, so to make it concrete. For example, the woman with the situation with the cancer and her healing, she told me that at one point on her journey, as she was meditating, listening, an idea came to her. She did not have to force it. Really, a thought came, a truth came, and that thought was telling her that she was innocent. It was the idea of innocence. Again, she's struggling with all this belief of cancer and all those things, and a thought comes about her innocence. And that was refreshing. That was refreshing. And you can begin to see that right away you begin to crack the wall of maybe you're punished, maybe you're guilty of something, maybe you've done something wrong, maybe you deserve this thing. And some of us, sometimes when it rains outside, we're apologetic. I'm so sorry it rains. I must have done something wrong. And so the sense of guilt can be very present at times. So I'm not saying that this idea did the whole healing, but this idea brought a truth, this idea of innocence that dissolved in her own thinking, her false belief about her being guilty or punished or deserving this for whatever reason. It gave her a sense of standing, that she could stand on her innocence. She could fight to know that she doesn't deserve this. The presence of God, she can have that. This is hers. That was on her journey. This idea coming to thought, this truth, this divine idea, in Christian Science is called the Christ. That's the Christ coming to consciousness. Hold on, you're going to say, well, I thought the Christ was a man crucified. Well, yes, Jesus the Christ, but the best way I can describe it is that Jesus was so in tune with divine ideas, with the divine message, that he became the message. It's a bit like if one of us listened to his or her favorite radio all day long, I don't know, Radio Solvang, and that person adores Radio Solvang, listens to Radio Solvang all day long, and his or her friends nickname him or her, well, that's Mrs. Solvang, Mrs. Radio Solvang, because everything he speaks about, he keeps repeating what he hears. Well, Jesus was not repeating limitations or any sense of us being depressed. He was repeating and talking about our oneness with the infinite. But he did not originate those ideas. Those were coming from divine mind, God. So that's the Christ. And that's what I love about Christian Science and that I adored when I was a lawyer. I was looking into it. It's how logical it is and how he makes the Bible make sense. Then the Bible really makes sense, because going back to the Christ, there's a point where Jesus says, before Abraham, so if I take time, Jesus here, Abraham was a long time before Jesus, but Jesus says, before Abraham, I was. And you feel, well, what are you talking about? Well, talking about the Christ, that the Christ, this divine influence in consciousness, in our consciousness, is always present. So he was present in Abraham's thought. It is eternal. This is really God making itself known. So it's in our consciousness. And this is what does the healing, this divine idea. So I would say the first ingredient of this prayer that heals is our recognition that we don't have to do anything. It is really the Christ in thought that will listen, will hear a thought that really heals us. I'm going to talk about a second ingredient, but let's make it practical a bit. So let's put in real context. Some years ago, not a long time ago, about 3-4 years ago, my wife was pregnant and with our third child. And she is British, so what we do normally with our first baby is we start the pregnancy in France, and then we go and give birth in England, which is just next door, and to France, to a little local hospital next to our mom and family. Just is a wonderful experience. Europe, unlike the US, has a lot of regulation on medical testing and all types of stuff we have to comply, and this is fine. So we went through those tests, and early on in the pregnancy, French doctors suspected something wrong with the baby, that the baby would have to be monitored. So we even saw a specialist, a cardiologist for children. And then we went to England, and the cardiologist said, this needs to be monitored. There's probably something wrong with the baby's heart. And that news was as annoying as those noises. We felt nothing wrong with it. The joy of having a baby, and you got those doubts and stuff coming. See, this kind of breaks the joy, but not our joy, so it's fine. British doctors confirmed the whole thing. Not one doctor, like 3 doctors. I'm sitting in hospital next to a big screen with colors. It's the baby's heart with areas, and basically the diagnosis is surgery. The baby will not be born in your local hospital. You have to bring him to the big hospital. Your wife has to be induced. Your wife has to be induced, looking for the word, so that when she's induced, they can control the baby's birth, so that the whole medical team is here, and he'll go in intensive care and surgery. And on the top of this, they said that even if the heart surgery was to be successful, this little one would be a heart patient all his life. His heart would have to be monitored basically all his life. So speaking about darkness, you can see the dark thought presented to thinking. But we always have a choice. We always have a choice. The question is never how dark the situation is in your life or in our life. The question is always, where is the light, and looking for the light. So we called a Christian Science practitioner for more support, and we began to pray too. So the idea of the Christ, of course, helped us, that it was not about us fixing or being good at prayer. It is never about self. If you find yourself thinking, well, I don't know how to do it, you can agree, say, well, I'm good because it's not my job to do it. Says, I don't know how to, I'm going to make the sun shine in the sky. Well, that's fine. It's not your job to make the sun shine in the sky. It does it on its own. You can just enjoy it. So that's good. So back to our second ingredients, really the question of evil. And that's something quite unique to really Jesus' teachings and as understood by Christian Science, the question of evil. Evil, disease, accidents, war, anything like that. Very specifically, Jesus does not say in his teachings, in his life, he does not say that evil is something powerful, something we should be afraid of. He does not say evil is something we should be afraid of, something powerful, and that somehow through God we'll push it out in some way or break it down. He doesn't say this. He says evil is a lie. Evil is a lie. And a lie feels real. If I was to ask the back row there, or you on the computer, if those are fake flowers or real flowers, and I'll say those are real flowers. Is it a lie or not? We don't know. It's hard to say, but because they could be, and by the way, they're fresh and beautiful. But it could be fake flowers. And what about those bamboo? Oh, fresh flowers, fresh bamboo. So the point is, how many flowers do you have here? Do you have fake plastic flowers and fresh flowers? No, you only have fresh flower, and a lie about it. I just voiced the lie that they would be fake. And a lie only has an impact as long as we believe it. So you may leave this room and I'm going to be overdramatic and feel, my gosh, that was a nice talk, but those fake flowers, they could have brought real flower. I'm going to complain and all be worked up. But you're being handled by a lie that has zero substance. So I do realize that when we're in pain and when we have a challenge, it feels more real than fake flowers. But that's the beauty of it. Jesus says, treat it as an illusion, as a lie. And how do you destroy a lie? With the truth. And that's what Jesus says. He says, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And you see how everything begins to make sense, that the Christ idea is the truth coming to consciousness, dissolving. For example, I talked about the lie of being guilty with the truth of innocence. So it does mean that when we pray, and that's a critical aspect of Christian Science treatment, is that when we pray, we're not trying to fix a real challenge. We're not trying to have those fake flowers somehow become fresh flowers again. We're really treating our own thought, yielding within our own consciousness to a spiritual perception of reality, a divine presence that we embrace, so that we're not hypnotized, we're not handled by what appears to be very real evil. And you know what happened with my son, because it turned out to be a son eventually, I didn't know then. The idea that came to us as we prayed was the idea of perfection, that he was perfect. That's our true nature, that we are the effect of the infinite, we are the effect of God. So perfection is not an option, perfection is who we are. And that became very strong in our thought. Then the big day happens, and so baby comes out, and he stays a few minutes with my wife, and then the whole medical team takes the baby away. Before doing the surgery, they had to do more testing and more stuff to prepare for surgery. But for a few hours, we're not sure what was happening. And then the news broke that there was no need for surgery. So they called for a meeting in the main doctor's office. And I can't remember really what he told me before handing me this stack of paper, which was his medical record for the baby. But I know what he said when he gave me the paper. He says, well, you can go home. Your child is perfect. And there was no trace of the challenge. He was completely healed. And I did not bring him today with me, but if he was there, he would be jumping up and down and running and being very happy and healthy. It was a complete healing. Not a miracle. It is very natural. It is very natural, and not something limited to us here or anybody. It is very natural that when we focus on our oneness with God, but sometimes it's the last thing we want to do because we're so buried in financial challenges that we feel, I should do this or that, or should whatever. We feel we're buried in the darkness, but it is very natural for all of us to focus on our oneness with God and feel this sense of peace. And the healing happens really within consciousness when this sense of peace and joy comes, and then our experience changes because, as we said, and as we've seen, our state of consciousness and our experience is the same thing. So we've seen that this form of prayer is really about yielding to the Christ idea, getting out of the way. We saw it's not about fixing something, but realizing it is just a lie, so treating it as a lie and seeing the truth about it. The last thing I'd like to add is the purpose of this is not to bring healing, all those, what the ingredients I'm explaining, it's not to bring healing in some way, it's not almost, it's not a tool. It is really to have our thought let go of belief, let go of fear, so that eventually we can really feel a sense of oneness with God. So all those ingredients are just like steps helping us to feel a sense of God. The last ingredient I'd like to mention is the idea of deconstructing the belief as it comes to thought, deconstructing the situation. What I mean by this is that, for example, going back to Zach, his name is Zachary, Zach, when we're praying about him, of course, quite quickly we were focusing on his sense of perfection, really trying to let go of the fear and really listening to the Christ idea about his perfection, but really focus on him. What I mean by deconstructing is that there is more to the story. There's the doctors and the opinions and the hospital and then whatever else is coming to our thought that makes a little theater of the challenge. So what I mean by deconstructing is making sure that as we pray, we expect to see a complete change and a complete embracing of God's presence for everything involved. For example, praying for the doctor. That we could not believe that Zach was the effect of God, but somehow there would be a material, limited doctor doing something. No, that was also a false vision, that the actual vision is that the doctor is as at one with God as we all are and expresses the fullness of God. Again, we're not trying to influence the doctors out there. There is nothing out there. It's all within our thought, what we accept in our consciousness. So if we see it in our thought, whether we're annoyed about the war in a distant country, or, I don't know, the city mayor, and we feel annoyed about whatever acts it is, or a child, or mother-in-law, it is, or some sound in a room, it is never about what seems to be out there. It is always about what we see in thought that creates resentment, fear, anger. That's what we're praying about. So when I mean deconstruct, let's not just focus on, if I'm lacking money, let's not focus only on, yes, I have everything that God has, to have a sense of our oneness and the absence of lack. Let's also see, well, okay, I believe that my job is the source of my income. Well, no, a job is not a source of income. God is the source of everything good. So you see, you enlarge the treatment, you enlarge the prayer to whatever is constructing it in your thought. So it's deconstructing it. And it heals. It heals. A last element that I feel is essential to deal with also as we pray that way is kind of to check our thought is on that phrase from Jesus when he says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." A truth always destroys a lie. If it's a truth, it'll destroy the lie all the time. And it's to have this sense of conviction that, yes, God heals. Yes, us realizing the presence of God does bring a change in our experience, that the truth always destroys the lie. But and when I find myself doubting, oh, is this going to work? Or not sure I can heal this, or whatever doubt, I would not ignore it. I would just spend time to really think about, okay, what is this doubt saying? And it's one easy way to do it is to look at the thousands and thousands of healings that have been reported in Christian Science periodicals that people have experienced, just to be reminded that, yeah, well, get out of there, evil suggestion, you got nothing there, because actually the truth always destroys the lie. But that's something, an ingredient that I find very important to hold in thought and to be watchful. Then the final elements. How do we know when our prayer is over? How do we know that we can stop praying? And I find that this is very critical because we stop praying when we have a sense of peace. Remember when I shared early on the healing of this woman who said she had a growth in her throat, and I had such a sense of conviction of her oneness with God. That was the healing. The healing was that sense of conviction, that sense of peace, that sense of joy. That was the healing. Remember I mentioned I did not need to call her to say, "Are you healed now?" No, because doing this would kind of defeat the prayer. It is self-complete when we have such a sense of clarity that we don't need to ask. We know. I think Joy made the beautiful bouquet here. I don't need to call her to ask her, are those fake or real one? I know they're real, they're fresh. Someone can convince me, otherwise they're beautiful, fresh flowers. Everything else about the fact that it could be plastic was a total lie. So I find it very helpful to realize that once we feel this sense of peace, this sense of joy, that's the healing, because it relates to our progress. What I mean by this is sometimes, yes, we do pray about something that is challenging us, and within minutes, days, super quickly, there's a complete sense of peace, complete sense of oneness with God, and whatever challenge is completely healed, just like we see in the Bible and recently with all those Christian Science healings. But sometimes it seems to take time, and the little wolf of discouragement may invite itself in our home to say, hey, should give up, or what? Why does it relate to progress? Because the decoy is always the symptom. The decoy is always the situation out there. And a decoy is not something you want to go after because it is a decoy. So we want to go after the real thing. The real thing is our thought, which means that if, as I begin to pray about any situation, and I felt quite afraid on Monday, and I pray and I really pray and listen and read the psalm maybe, and I feel on Monday evening, I don't feel a sense of peace. I don't feel I want to jump up and down, but I feel a lot less afraid. And on Tuesday I pray and I feel a bit less afraid. This is progress. This is good. Irrespective of whether the leg works or doesn't work or whatever the challenge is. But we're always tempted, and it's always a temptation to kind of check the prayer, to pray and check. Okay, there's still plastic. There's still plastic. No, it is always in our thoughts, so you can see how it relates to our progress. And there is no darkness that can resist the light. Even the darkest night, even if I crack a little match with a tiny bit of light, that will begin to dissolve the darkness, because again, our challenges have no substance. They have no history, no law, no power behind them. They're just a belief about the absence of God. So when we focus on God, then we find healing. I mentioned the book Science and Health by the author Mary Baker Eddy, and there are some cookies there, but if we were to talk about her life, we need to bring dinner and stay all evening so we can really properly honor her life, because she was a fantastic woman. So I'll just give you just a few things so you want to run to a Christian Science reading room nearby and get a copy of a biography, because she's really fantastic. Number one, she was a woman in 1840-something, at a time where women were not really seen as big thinkers, and with a few exceptions, and making a big difference in religion. But her revelation of those ideas, what she found out about spiritual perception, going back to Jesus' healings, not creed, came really gradually to her thought. It was not a massive revelation. She had a very difficult part of her life with disease and death of husbands and children lost, but she never gave up the light. She always knew that God doesn't send disease. Makes no sense that infinite love would send trials and challenges. She always kept on with that sense of light, that sense of God can be known and it can make sense. And eventually, through her own healing, by really simply being aware of spirit, aware of the kingdom of heaven in a very scientific way, not some believing way, in a very factual way, then she experienced healing. As she experienced healing, she really tried to understand what happened with her healing, which is very different from an intellectual that would kind of write ideas. No, she didn't start with ideas. She started with her experience and experiments, and then the ideas came, and then she eventually put those ideas in the book Science and Health with the Scriptures, and basically, one key idea is that we all have a unique relationship with the infinite. So if you look at Mary Baker Eddy's life, she did everything possible to discourage people to rely on persons, on her or on a priest or a minister. She said, we have a relationship with the infinite. This is what matters. And this is what I find is beautiful with Christian Science. It is not a one-size-fits-all. It takes us where we are, and we take a step, and then we get a clearer sense of God, and another step, and we find healing, and we keep digging and digging and digging, and that's amazing. My favorite biography is called Mary Baker Eddy, Christian Healer, and you can find it online if you are online right now, or in Christian Science reading rooms, because a Christian Science reading room is a room where you can read, and then you can buy those things. So. Just to conclude, the core of it, the simple idea is don't give up. It does heal. Finding out your connection with the infinite, embracing this spiritual perception does heal. It does. So don't give up. Don't give up. If I recap quickly what we've seen on prayer, we've seen that sometimes we have such a sense of oneness with God that we don't need to do anymore. We just feel, we have our daughter on the phone who says, Mom, it's a catastrophe, blah, 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 blah. And we have such a sense of calm, such a sense of divine presence that she said, well, maybe you don't even listen to me. Anyway, well, I'll call you back later. And then in the evening, she says, I don't know what happened, Mom, but I mean, this thing happened and everything is fine, so I guess everything is fine. But we're not surprised, because when we got the phone call, we had such a sense of gentle presence that it brought the healing. Again, we're not responsible for it, but it was coming to our thought. And in those other cases where we are really impressed by the fear, the situation, for us, for somebody else, for our country, for our world, it can be a weather situation in some part of the country, it can be upcoming elections. We feel worried, then in a way, it's like a violin. Our violin is slightly out of tune. It was very in tune when the daughter called, but it was a bit out of tune, so we need to tune it, and tuning the violin doesn't make the music, but you cannot have the music if it's not tuned. So that's why he talked about tuning it. And so we've seen that, of course, we're not doing more than Jesus. So if Jesus says, I can do nothing of my own self, we're not doing more than Jesus. We're really recipient of ideas, of divine ideas that come to us, that are very specific to us, and they're going to dissolve any belief we're entertaining and sometimes things we're not aware of. It is not uncommon that when we pray about a situation, we feel a sense of peace, and something from our childhood comes to thought, something negative. It's not some form of psychotherapy. What I'm saying is, as we embrace our oneness with infinite, sometimes evil thought that we're really hiding in our consciousness come to the surface just to be healed, just like when we clean our house and we sweep the floor. Sometimes we see, oh, there's more under the table, and so we clean under the table. And then we've seen that, yes, evil is a lie. And actually, the only way to find healing of anything is on this basis to see evil as a lie. The second we see evil for more than a lie, it calls for defeat. Or we'll have some form of some form of a faith healing, and the thing won't be solved or come back again because it's still in thought. And then we saw the concept of really embracing the whole situation. It's not just praying about our situation there. That's what I call deconstructing, making sure that the whole thing coming to thought is really seen spiritually. When Jesus gave an example of prayer, the Lord's Prayer, he said, when you pray, pray our Father which art in heaven. He didn't say, when you pray, pray your Father, because you're good. He says, no, it's inclusive. It's whatever we have in thought needs to go. And the healing is the sense of peace. The healing is the conviction of our oneness with God. This is the healing. The side effect of the healing is the human situation being solved and the physical symptoms being gone and the daughter being happy again. That's the side effect of it. The healing is really that sense of oneness with God. I'll finish with this unusual saying from Jesus when he sent his students to go into villages, talk about the kingdom of heaven and healing others. And when they came back, the students, the disciples, were very excited, you could tell from the Bible narrative, because, they were not born healers, they were fishermen, they were tax collector, and here they were witnessing healings. And they come to Jesus with a sense of joy, and say, well, there's healings. And when you read the Bible, you think, what is happening? Because it says, Jesus said, do not rejoice over the healing. But he says, rejoice because your names are written in heaven. And that's the point. Again, the side effect is what seems to be the physical healing, but the point is not about more material comfort. The point is not to have more material comfort. Actually, prayer challenges the very conception of a material universe and replaces it with a sense of divine presence. So the good news is our names are written in heaven. We're all at one with God, and that's the really, really good news. The rest is kind of the cookies to help us there. So I think Jesus had the true sense of joy. This is the joy. I said it was my last sentence, but I'll just add one more to really finish now. It's from Luke, and I think it applies to all of us. Jesus speaking, and he says, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So there's a lot there. The kingdom is given to us. This sense of oneness, we don't have to own it. We don't have to get baptized. Baptism is a purification of thought. It is given to us. And my favorite part is that we're given the kingdom. We're not given a very tiny house on the side of the kingdom and with a damp wall and some challenges. No, it's the entire kingdom. So God always gives you the best, always gives us the best. And how do we find this best? How do we find this sense of health, which is the perfect consciousness of harmony? How do we find this? Well, we find it through spiritual perception. Thank you. So there are lots of goodies today. There are some